Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Cade. Welcome to Pierced Heart Apologetics. Today, we're talking with the problem of defining atheism. Now, there isn't really a problem with defining atheism. We actually have had it defined for quite a while now, and that is the affirmative position that is God does not exist. At least, probably. I mean, typically speaking, when we talk about worldview, we're not talking about 100% certainty. That's kind of a given. Um, but the problem comes with people, predominantly the new atheists, who want to say, "Oh, it's nothing more than a lack of belief in God." I have some issues with this, though. 3 to be precise, and it's kind of annoying, mostly because these people are a lot of the most smug new atheist types who say things like, "Oh, you believe in Sky Daddy, Sky Daddy? You really believe in a bunch of fairy tales? Wow." Or like, bro just believes everything he hears. That type of, attitude that people carry about them. A lot of those people will use things like, well, atheism is nothing more than a lack of belief. And if you're not like that, then, more of the hostility here is not directed towards you. But with that being said, my 3 points, my 3 issues. Number 1, we already have a word for simply not having the belief of, but not holding an affirmative position, and that is agnosticism. Number 2, because it's not true, or it isn't true most of the time, I should say. It just isn't true. Most of these people just think that the best explanation for reality is one where God does not exist, and that is an affirmative position. It is a part of their worldview, and they can be held to it. And because of that, 3, they're using this definition, whether it's, a conscious understanding of what the kind of slippery, disingenuous way that they're using this redefinition. Regardless, it is dishonest argumentation, and it doesn't really lead us anywhere. And it also just, I think it causes issues with the way that people start to really tackle discussion, and they aren't able to as accurately understand where they sit. With that being said, let's get into it. Number 1, obviously, we already have the term agnostic. That is, not knowing. That's not holding an affirmative position that anything in particular is true. Now, some people will try and merge these two and say, "Oh, well, I'm an agnostic atheist." It's like, well, yeah, if you want to use the definition that I'm criticizing, then sure, you could say agnostic atheist. But again, this blurring of the lines of what atheism means with agnosticism just takes away the whole point of the linguistic distinction between the two. And that is that there are people who hold the position that God does not exist as an affirmative position. That's what they think the best explanation of reality is. And if you're saying, oh, it's just a lack of belief, well, then you fit in a whole bunch of people who aren't that. So you have people who think that God might exist, but they're not really convinced of it, with people who think that God probably doesn't exist, almost certainly doesn't exist. And I feel like that's an important distinction. Those two people are not as close as you think they are. Um, and if you just don't know, then just be an agnostic and just be fine with that. Don't use the atheist term because, well, but I don't believe in God. It's like, yeah, but you don't not believe in God, right? You also don't believe that God doesn't exist in that sense. And if you do, well, then that's point 2, that you actually do hold the affirmative position that God doesn't exist. And if that's the case, then that's your worldview, and hold to it, defend it. That's the thing that you should be defending. And if you can't defend it, then like you're kind of just admitting that you don't necessarily have a better worldview than me, in which case you don't have any room to say that I'm, you know, like dumber than you or anything like that. And if you're not like that, again, not so much targeted towards you. Um, but I feel like this kind of happens a lot with this discussion is you'll have people who, they'll say like they'll consider you so stupid for being a theist, and then they just don't present a worldview of their own. And it's like, hold on, you have a worldview. What is it? How about you defend it? Which brings me to point 3, which is then they invoke, well, I just lack a belief in God, nothing more. I'm not actually holding an affirmative position. It's like, okay, this seems like you're just running, quite frankly, because you don't want to have to actually defend your worldview. But this also is just not. the way that we typically like it just like if we're talking about discussions like this, it's like you just criticizing my position while not providing an alternative is not helpful. And if you have a better position, then why aren't you presenting it so that you can help me come to truth? Like, do you just not care? Because if you don't care, then I don't even understand why you're having this discussion. Um, but because it's dishonest, this is, the biggest problem that I have with it is that it is causing people to just stay where they're at, even if it's just like, oh, you're so dumb because you're a Christian. Like, oh, you really believe all this crap that people tell you? And it's like, well, that's the position that I'm holding to. Yeah. Um, you know, do you have a better position? And then the response is basically, well, no, I'm not presenting anything. I just lack a belief. Okay. It has no explanatory power, which is just completely like you're basically making fun of me for getting the wrong answer on a test, and you put nothing on the answer. Like, you don't have room to make fun of me when I'm actually contending with reality and like trying to hold the best position I can. And then you're just sitting back and just being like, no, I don't actually have any burden of proof. Um, like people want to just like the people who are using this, what they're really wanting to do is they're wanting to like sit back and just like poke holes and say you're stupid for holding the position you do without giving you the better, alternative. And this type of behavior would never be tolerated in their spaces. And it's the type of behavior that allows you to act like Matt, I'm not convinced Dillahunty, because it's a perpetual goalpost shift since it's basically just, well, I'm just not convinced. It's like, okay, what's the better alternative? Well, I'm not presenting anything. Great. So it's vacuous. Why are you convinced of something other than my position if you don't have anything better to offer? Because that's not how science is done, right? Like that's not how science and rationality is done. If I went to evolutionists, and to be clear, I don't deny evolution. I don't really hold any particular position. I'm just using this as an example. But like if I went to evolutionists and I'm just like, oh, I'm an evolutionist. I just lack a belief in evolution. In fact, you're pretty stupid if you believe in evolution. Um, and like they'd probably be like, "Oh, really? And why is that?" And it's like, "Well, there's an issue with the chain of fossil records and whatnot, and I've never nobody's ever witnessed evolution right before their eyes or whatever." Again, I'm not very well versed on evolution, and I don't deny it. I'm just saying this as an as an example of something stupid. Um, like you wouldn't take that person seriously for more than 5 seconds, like, especially if you then ask, like, "Okay, well, what do you think's going on here? Like, what's with all these fossils? What's with all this stuff going on here? What do you think is happening, if not evolution?" Well, I'm an evolution. I choose lack of belief. Okay, I'm not presenting anything better." Like, you'd be like, "Okay, so there's a few problems with our theory. Well, until you give us a better theory, this is the theory we're sticking to." That's how science is done. I just knocked off a water bottle. Anyways, like that's how science is done. And yet these people who are like the kings of rationality, they're so rational and so much better than you. They just want to run and they don't want to actually have to present something better. And my message to my fellow Christians is if somebody is not presenting a better alternative or they are truly an agnostic, they're just not sure and they're not going to say, because they're not actually an atheist. If they're not actually, my the issue with my second problem, if they really just aren't convinced of any particular view, they're not necessarily convinced that God doesn't exist. They think there might be evidence that, there's more than just materialism or whatever. Don't take their criticism too harshly and don't make it so like existential. Like yes, be careful and be considerate with what they're saying, but if they're not convinced of the other alternatives, or they're unwilling to present their argument up for scrutiny, you probably are just fine. Like, you shouldn't worry too much about what they think because they're not convinced of a better alternative, or at least they're not convinced in a way that they're willing to defend. So it's like, well, just hold on to your theory then. If they don't present another theory that's better, I would hold on to your theory. Um, and that's kind of the issue that gets under my skin, at least with this whole thing, is that it's all about just kind of not having to present something better because that takes more work. And I somewhat get that. And I'm not saying that every interaction needs to be a full presentation of everybody's worldview, but at least it needs to be up for discussion. And I want to, say to my fellow Christians, hold other people to their worldview and ask them questions, because a lot of the time atheists aren't, it's not even necessarily that they're trying to run or that they're trying not to present an alternative. Sometimes it's just that they haven't even been asked. And they haven't even thought about it much because nobody asks them. Like, as a Christian, we get asked why we believe what we believe all the time, but quite often atheists don't get asked a lot why they believe what they believe, other than it being, well, I just don't believe in what you believe. Like, that's what it boils down to, is I just don't believe in what you believe, and so I defaulted to this other position. Um, and really, they don't have very good reasons, and that can help us as Christians understand. Oh, wait, no, our position's pretty good. One a good example of this is like the resurrection. Like, people I've corresponded with online, like when I ask them what they think happened with, say, the resurrection, like I'll find a problem with what they just said, and then they'll flip flop. They'll move to a different position, and it's like, what position do you hold? Like, can you stick with any of these, or are you just going to flip flop and contradict yourself? Um, but anyways, like, I'm trying to think of anything else to say, and I think I about covered it all. So to recap, number one, we already have a linguistic distinction with the word agnostic. This is, I think, an important linguistic distinction, even if it's kind of a minor point. Number two, it's almost never true that these people simply lack a belief. Most of them actually think the best explanation for God is that God does not exist. It is an affirmative position that is a part of their worldview. You not only can, but you really should hold them to it and ask them it. And three, they're using this definition so that they don't have to actually provide a defense for what they believe. They want to sit back, poke holes, and call you an idiot, at least some of them, um, and then not actually have to present a better alternative. And so you should hold on to your position unless a better alternative is presented. And you should, recognize that a lot of these people are doing this so that you know, they don't have to actually concede to your points. They can just say, well, you have problems with yours. I'm just not convinced. And this is a shifting goalpost that never ends for a bunch of people. And that's why I have issues with the way that atheism is defined by a lot of people in the modern discussion. With that being said, whether you're an atheist or you're a Christian or whatever you are, I hope that this made sense and that you could understand why we would have an issue with defining atheism in this way. Thank you for watching the video and considering any of the words coming out of my mouth. Um, and I hope that regardless of where you're at, we can all lead ourselves, or lead each other, rather, I should say, into more truth through honest and meaningful discussion, not through, simple, like, just calling people dumb and then running away because, well, I don't need to provide anything. I'm not making an affirmative claim. Um, you know, with that being said, though, I hope every single person who is watching this video has a wonderful night, and take care.